In this video we want to look at some of the more meaningful connecting words in Greek, in particular what we might call subordinating conjunctions. Now, in another video I've talked about coordinating conjunctions, and we might briefly review them. They are also meaningful, but they are fairly basic and commonsensical. So for example, the word and, kai, de can also mean and, although it can also mean but. Sometimes it means now. Allah is a stronger contrastive, but certainly indicates a contrast between two things. A, which normally means or, sometimes it can mean than in some contexts. When it's being used as a conjunction of this sort, a coordinating conjunction, it means or. Of course, if you have a, some words, and another a, and some other words, it usually means either or. In the same way, if you have kai, some words, and then another kai and some words, that usually means both and. Gar. Gar means for, or because. Generally, though, gar will mean for as a conjunction rather than as a as part of a sentence. It'll mean for connecting two thoughts. And then un can mean therefore. Gar tends to imply that you're explaining. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, or substantiating, defending. Un tends to imply some sort of a logical cause-effect. If this is true, then this should be true. Or therefore, I urge you, brothers, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, given everything that's been written in Romans so far. So these are the main coordinating conjunctions. Coordinating means it joins two things of a similar grammatical weight. A word and a word, or a phrase and a phrase, or a clause and a clause, where they're on equal status. Subordinating conjunctions, on the other hand, they don't introduce something that can stand on its own, but they in some way qualify the main verb of a clause of a sentence. So here are some subordinating conjunctions. These are very rich in meaning, things to be learned. They go with subordinating clauses. A subordinating clause is one that cannot stand alone as a freestanding sentence. It does have a subject and a verb, but it doesn't make a sentence. So for example, here's a subordinating clause: so that we could get ice cream. Now there is a subject and a verb there, we can get, but it's not a sentence. So that we can get ice cream. I mean, it's not a complete thought. That's a subordinating clause. You need a main clause with it. We left early so that we could get ice cream. Now there's a sentence. So subordinating conjunctions introduce subordinating clauses. Because he knew what was in the heart of mortals. There's the example I have on the slide. Not a complete sentence. And by the way, there's because in a part of a sentence, as opposed to gar, which means for, introducing maybe a sentence. Okay, so here are some subordinating conjunctions that express purpose or result. A purpose would be something like in order that. The result would be so that. Purpose looks at it from the standpoint of before. Result looks at it from the standpoint of after. So here are a couple of examples. Both hina and hapos can mean in order that. They can also mean so that. The context is going to have to tell you which one. When they are best translated in order that, they're expressing purpose. I went home early in order that I might get the dessert that was left over from lunch before my wife. So that is more the result. I wasn't looking where I was going, with the result that I crashed into the car in front of me. So that so that's the difference between purpose and result. One looks at it from the standpoint of why you're doing it before. Result looks at it from the standpoint of what happened after. Both of these Greek words, CJ being the abbreviation for conjunction, Both of these words can either express purpose or result. Sometimes these can simply be translated that in a way that introduces something called a noun clause. He said that he was coming over tomorrow. All of that clause, that he was coming over tomorrow, functions grammatically like a single word. He said bleh. He said that. He said that he was coming over tomorrow. All of that's what he said. So that's a noun clause, where the whole clause is being used somewhat like a noun, and it's usually introduced with the word that. Again, both of these words in Greek, at least New Testament Greek, can simply introduce a noun clause that is best translated by that. So you can try on any one of these translations for size and see which one fits best. Greek moods. We've talked about participles a little bit in the past. They aren't really verbs. They're verbal adjectives. So all the verbs up to this point that you've seen have been indicative. And indicative means you're saying something, or you're asking it could also be a factual question. So he was baptizing. In the nomenclature of mounts and mounts, this is a verb, V. It is imperfect, active, indicative. We're finally learning what indicative means. It means that you're indicating. It's a statement. He was baptizing. Of course, it could be wrong. You could say he was God, and that would be wrong if you were talking about Ken Skank. So indicative simply means that the way in which you're talking about it is you're talking about it in a factual way, or you're asking a factual question. Was that the man who came over yesterday? Yes, it was. What is his name? His name is Bob. Those are all indicative kinds of factual ways of talking, and that's what the third I means, indicative. And of course this one's third person singular. He, she, or it was baptizing. So indicative is about telling stuff or asking factual stuff. Now that we're doing this discussion of subordinate clauses and subordinating conjunctions, we need to learn about some of the other moods. So, for example, purpose clauses tend to be have verbs. Not only will they have a conjunction like hina, but they will have a verb that is in the subjunctive mood, and so you're going to have an S in that third position. Most of the time, how you translate a subjunctive verb is just a matter of that word, in order that. So you've got an in order that in front of it, and so you know it's going to be subjunctive, but you're just going to translate it normal, commonsensical. So in order that he might have life. This is subjunctive. See that? It is verb, present, active, subjunctive, third person singular. The reason why it's subjunctive is because this conjunction demands that the verb that goes with it be subjunctive, at least in New Testament Greek. And so the subjunctive is simply following the rules of this particular conjunction. So most of the time, just knowing that the key word, you're going to say, well, why is this subjunctive? What does that mean? And the answer that you should feel comfortable with is, well, it's subjunctive because this little dictator conjunction says it had to be, and that as long as I translate the conjunction right, in order that, then I don't have to worry about some special translation. Although might, may, that's all fine as a giveaway. So the indicative has to do with the factual. The subjunctive has to do with the probable, the might, and so forth. And so certain subordinating conjunctions like hina and hapos demand that their verb be in the subjunctive mood. So hosta, this is another kind of subordinate clause. A hosta introduces result clauses. Hina can introduce result clauses, but hina can also introduce purpose clauses. Hosta tends to introduce result clauses. And you can generally start off with a translation something like so that. Now, hosta actually will take an indicative verb, or it might come with an infinitive after it. An infinitive is a to-do word, a to word. To dream the impossible dream, that's an infinitive. And so Greek sometimes does kind of bad English. It'll say, so that him not to know what to do. But that's fine Greek, not very good English, and so you're going to have to flex a little with your English. So here's an example. 3 examples. Let me give you a translation for them. Thus loved God the world. For God so loved the world. That's from 3:16. That's the first part is stuff we've already done. With the result that, ώστε, with the result that he gave the Son, the only begotten Son. That's an attributive construction, if you remember. Because the adjective has the article on it, it's a the good man situation. So that he gave the only begotten Son. So ώστε introduce. Gar is a coordinating conjunction explaining. Ώστε is a subordinating conjunction that is introducing a result clause. God so loved the world with the result that he gave his only begotten Son. Why did he do it? Hina, purpose clause. In order that everyone, all the believing one, everyone who believes, this is a participle with an article, so it's an adjectival participle, so that every believing one on him might not perish. And this is subjunctive because the little dictator here told it had to be subjunctive. So this is sturdy stuff. But we're now getting to some of the meatiest aspects of Greek grammar. But you can pretty much understand all this just on the basis of knowing the conjunctions. So hina can introduce a purpose or a result clause. Ώστε tends to introduce a result clause. Okay, but there's another conjunction, a coordinating conjunction. Not this, but might have life eternal, eternal life. And this is also subjunctive because of hina. So hina tells this that it has to be subjunctive in order that he might not perish, but in order that he might have eternal life, or she as well. Okay, so conjunction, junction, what's your function? Hooking up words and phrases and clauses. Haughty. Now haughty is a little conjunction that either means that or because, and it's going to take an indicative verb. Now when it means because, it introduces because clauses, or what we might call causal clauses. When it means that, it tends to introduces noun clauses, like I was mentioning before. Hina sometimes introduces noun clauses. Haughty is the normal one. Haughty is the one we prefer in terms of introducing noun clauses. You know that, he said that, and there are certain kinds of constructions that kind of expect a noun clause. Actually, that in my example just then was a relative clause, so ignore what I just emphasized. Okay, so one type of noun clause haughty can introduce is direct discourse or a quotation. A lot of times when it does that, you're not going to translate. Paul argued that not even unto the law have I sinned. Neither against the law have I sinned, maybe is the translation. I can't remember where this is from, but I'm just doing it cold turkey. A lot of times you're not going to translate the haughty. This capital letter, now not all Greek New Testaments do it, but some Greek New Testaments capitalize the beginning of a quote. The original wasn't. In original it was all capital letters. But to help you, a lot of Greek New Testaments will capitalize direct discourse or quotation. And so Paul argued, quote, I have not sinned against the law. And you're not going to translate the haughty. Sometimes you can translate the haughty. But so haughty translates as that or because. And there's some cases where it's going to be bad English and just don't translate it at all. Hos, relative clauses. We've already covered this previously. Hos introduces relative clauses. There are many forms of hos, as you might remember. Hos, hey, haw, and then many others. It's like a Greek ending without a word most of the time. So God spoke through a son, Han, whom he placed heir of all things. It's a R. It's a pronoun. It's accusative, singular, masculine. The A doesn't mean anything. It's Microsoft Word auto-correcting. Okay, so relative clauses are another kind of subordinate clause. Usually, a relative clause is going to have an indicative verb in it. Now, has on, with the little on here, this little word is untranslatable in a way, but it's like a little bomb. It throws everything up in the air, and it usually, almost always, the verb that goes with anything involving on is going to be subjunctive because it makes it uncertain. Instead of who, now we're talking whoever or whatever. Notice there's no translation here. It's a particle. That's what I think PL means. Particle means it's a little word we don't know how to classify any other way. So it takes a subjunctive verb. There are a lot of kind of words that are, I don't know if they're in this PowerPoint slide or not, where the word on has been joined to it. So hatan means whenever, for example. But hate means when, and it takes an indicative verb. It's obviously going to introduce a timing clause or a temporal clause. So now there's hatan. Hatan is hate, when, plus that little bomb on that makes it mean whenever. But again, these are just important words as far as meaning is concerned, because these subordinate clauses tell you a lot about what's going on in the sentence. Okay, and that's the end of this vidcast on more conjunctions, especially the most important subordinating conjunctions. If you notice these conjunctions, you will be greatly improved at your ability to interpret and follow the train of thought in a biblical text in the New Testament.